Silent Guess. Chapter 8. The Buried Case. Helen Sinclair did not look like a woman who had spent 10 years waiting to confess. She sat exactly as Lucy had seen her sit during every difficult conversation since their arrival at Ravensmere House. Back straight, hands composed, expression calm enough to invite the dangerous assumption that calmness meant certainty. Only the untouched cup of tea beside her betrayed anything unusual. A thin skin had begun to form across its surface, and Helen had made no attempt to drink from it. Lucy remained opposite her, with Amelia's copy of Rebecca resting across her knees. Andrew stood near the door, uncomfortable with the intimacy of the room, yet unwilling to leave. The fire behind Helen had burned low, reducing the once welcoming drawing room to a quieter place of embers, shadows, and rain-muted daylight. Through the open doorway beyond them, Amelia's portrait remained visible at the foot of the staircase. Helen looked towards it only once. Then she returned her attention to Lucy. "You should fetch Oliver." Lucy did not move. "You knew that book before you saw what Amelia wrote inside it?" Helen's expression remained unchanged. "Yes." "How?" "Because Amelia brought it to court." Andrew frowned. "A novel?" Helen nodded. "She carried it everywhere during the hearing." Lucy looked down at the worn cover. "And you remembered it after 10 years. There are cases one forgets because there is nothing unusual about them." Helen folded her hands together. This was not one of those cases. Lucy felt the weight of the book differently now. Amelia had held it inside a courtroom. She had perhaps sat somewhere waiting to testify with the same flower pressed between its pages and the same words hidden in its margin. What crime did she witness? Helen breathed in slowly. "Before I answer that, I need Oliver here." "Why?" "Because if Arthur was killed over what he discovered, anything I tell you may now form part of a murder inquiry." Lucy studied her. "Yesterday you were happy enough to discuss Arthur without him. Yesterday I was still hoping this had nothing to do with Amelia's case. And now?" Helen looked directly at the book. "Now I know Arthur found more than I thought he had." Andrew quietly opened the door. "I'll get him." Helen nodded. "Bring Henry too." That surprised Lucy. "Why Henry?" "You'll understand." Andrew left. For the first time since entering the room, Lucy and Helen were alone. The silence between them was not hostile, but neither was it comfortable. Lucy had interviewed politicians who mistook silence for weakness, and criminals who mistook it for permission. Helen did neither. She simply allowed it to exist. Eventually, Lucy spoke. "Did Arthur know what you did?" Helen looked towards her. "I don't know how much Arthur knew before Amelia died." "That's not what I asked." "No." Helen gave the smallest nod. "By the time he invited me here, yes. I believe he knew almost everything." "And you still came." "I came because he asked me to." "You expected him to confront you." "I expected him to do considerably worse than that." Lucy frowned. "What could be worse?" "To understand me." The answer caught Lucy off guard. Helen looked toward the dying fire. "Anger is relatively easy to endure. It makes everyone certain of their position." "And understanding?" "Understanding requires you to live with complexity." She returned her gaze to Lucy. "Arthur was very good at that." Lucy thought of the man in the library telling her truth could heal relationships and destroy them, sometimes simultaneously. It sounded painfully like him. "Do you regret what you did?" Helen's eyes hardened, though not with anger. "Every day." The door opened behind Lucy. Oliver entered first, notebook already in hand. Henry followed, his expression sharpening when he saw Helen and the book. Andrew closed the door once everyone was inside. Oliver remained standing. "Andrew said you have something to tell us." Helen nodded toward the empty chairs. "You may wish to sit." "I'm fine." That was not advice for your comfort. Oliver regarded her for a moment before sitting beside Lucy. Henry took a chair opposite. His gaze stayed fixed upon Helen. "You know," he said quietly. Helen looked back at him. "Yes." "What?" Lucy asked. Henry removed his glasses slowly. That Amelia's hospital visit and Helen's case were connected. Oliver's pen stopped above the page. You knew that? I suspected it last night. You didn't mention it. I had no evidence. Helen let out a weary breath. You had memory. Yes. And sometimes memory is the only evidence left. Oliver looked between them. Start at the beginning. Helen nodded. 10 years ago, I presided over a preliminary hearing involving allegations of serious misconduct at the Calder Hotel. Marcus's family hotel. Lucy felt the threads tightening. What kind of misconduct? Oliver asked. Initially theft. Edward Bell? Yes. Henry leaned forward. So the complaints Marcus mentioned reached court? Not exactly. Helen chose her words with visible care. Edward Bell had been accused by several hotel guests of stealing valuables. The hotel investigated privately and paid him to leave. Months later, one of those guests claimed Bell had attempted to blackmail her. With what? Lucy asked. Photographs. Elliot's camera seemed to appear in Lucy's mind immediately, although there was no reason it should. Helen continued. The guest alleged that Bell had gained access to hotel rooms, photographed private documents and personal situations, then used those images to demand money. Andrew stared at her. That's considerably worse than stealing watches. Yes. Was he charged? No. Why not? The complainant withdrew her statement. Oliver frowned. Before the hearing? After the initial application. Why? She said she had made a mistake. Helen's tone made it obvious she had never believed that explanation. Did Bell threaten her? We couldn't prove it. Then where does Amelia come in? Helen's hands tightened very slightly. Amelia had been investigating Bell independently. Lucy leaned forward. Why? She believed the hotel scandal was larger than one employee. Marcus's surname seemed to hang invisibly over the room. Helen noticed Lucy's expression. Do not jump ahead. Marcus may have known nothing about it. May? I am choosing my words carefully. Oliver nodded. Continue. Amelia had spoken to former employees, guests, and contractors. She came to believe Bell had not acted alone and that certain incidents had been deliberately concealed by management. Andrew looked uneasy. Marcus's father. Possibly. Possibly. The difficulty with Amelia was that she often knew more than she could prove. Henry gave a quiet laugh, devoid of humor. She told me exactly that. Helen looked towards him. At the hospital? Yes. Lucy turned. What else did she say? Henry hesitated. That she was close. To what? She wouldn't tell me. Helen nodded as if that confirmed something. She told me the same thing. Oliver's pen moved rapidly. When did Amelia become involved in your hearing? Helen looked at the fire. 3 days before she died. Nobody spoke. Lucy felt a familiar pressure behind her ribs. Amelia had been in court 3 days before her death. Was she supposed to testify? Oliver asked. Yes. About Bell? About evidence she had collected? What evidence? Helen stared towards Amelia's portrait beyond the doorway. A photograph. Elliot shifted somewhere in Lucy's thoughts again. Oliver's voice remained level. What did the photograph show? I never saw it. Lucy frowned. You suppressed evidence you never saw? I suppressed her testimony. Why? Helen closed her eyes briefly. The composure finally slipped. Not dramatically, just enough for Lucy to see the woman beneath the judge. Because I was told that allowing Amelia to testify would endanger another person. Oliver stopped writing. Who told you? Helen opened her eyes. A senior police officer. The room changed. Oliver's expression became very still. Name? Helen studied him. Chief Superintendent Robert K. Oliver frowned. The name meant something. Lucy saw it immediately. You know him. Oliver looked towards her. I knew of him. Knew? He died 4 years ago. Helen nodded. He was highly respected. By some. There was bitterness in Oliver's response. Helen noticed. So you had doubts. I was a constable when Kay was still running serious crime teams. You didn't question men like him. Helen gave him a sad smile. I was a high court judge. Did you? No. That single word seemed to condemn them both. Lucy looked between the retired judge and the serving police inspector. What did Kay tell you? Helen answered carefully. That Amelia had uncovered part of an active undercover operation. He said allowing her evidence into open court could expose a protected source and place several people at risk. And you believed him? Yes. Did you verify it? Helen did not answer. Lucy understood. You didn't. No. Why? Because he was a senior police officer presenting information under formal authority. Helen's voice sharpened slightly. And because judges make decisions with the information placed before them, not with the information they wish they possessed. Lucy held her gaze. But you regret it. I regret not asking whether the authority itself could be compromised. Henry sat back slowly. Amelia knew. Helen turned. Knew what? That someone inside the police was involved? Oliver stared at him. What makes you say that? Henry looked uncomfortable. Because when she came to A&E, she refused to let us call the police. Lucy remembered. She couldn't trust anyone. You said she intended to report being followed. I said I encouraged her to. Henry shook his head. She became frightened the moment I mentioned police. Helen's face lost color. You never told me that. I never knew you were involved. For several seconds, nobody seemed willing to speak. The old case had changed shape again. Edward Bell, the Calder Hotel, Amelia, a frightened complainant, a hidden photograph, a senior police officer, a judge who suppressed testimony, and somewhere inside those connections lay the truth Arthur had spent a decade reconstructing. Oliver looked towards Helen. What happened after you excluded Amelia's evidence? The application collapsed. Bell walked? There were never sufficient grounds to hold him. Where did he go? I don't know. And Amelia? Helen swallowed. She waited for me outside the courtroom. Lucy felt an immediate chill. What did she say? Helen looked directly at her. She told me I just protected the wrong person. The words settled over the room. What did you say? I told her that decisions had to be made according to law. And Amelia? Helen's mouth tightened. She said law was only useful when the people enforcing it were honest. Oliver looked down. Lucy suspected the remark had found its mark. Helen continued. She was angry. I was angry. I told her that if she had evidence of police corruption, she should make a formal complaint. Henry shook his head slowly. She must have thought you weren't listening at all. Yes. Helen did not defend herself. That is exactly what she thought. And 3 days later, she died, Andrew said quietly. Helen closed her eyes. Yes. Lucy stared at Amelia's book in her hands. What happened to the photograph? I don't know. Arthur never found it? Not that he told me. Oliver looked towards the leather folder still resting on the table across the room. Perhaps he did. Everyone followed his gaze. The folder seemed suddenly impossible to ignore. Helen watched it for several seconds. Arthur asked me one question yesterday. Lucy looked towards her. When? In the library, shortly after breakfast. Another private conversation. Another detail never mentioned. Oliver's tone hardened. You didn't include that in your timeline. No. Why? Because I was ashamed. That doesn't make it irrelevant. I know. The admission came quietly. What did Arthur ask? Helen looked towards Amelia's portrait. He asked whether I would make the same decision again. Lucy felt her breath catch. What did you tell him? That I didn't know. Helen's eyes shone, though no tears fell. Arthur smiled. She paused and said, That is the first honest answer you've given me in 10 years. Nobody spoke after that. They did not need to. For Lucy, the murder changed again in that moment. Arthur had not gathered these people simply to expose them. He had been confronting them with choices they had made years earlier and asking them to look at those choices honestly. Some had failed Amelia through fear, some through arrogance, some through ignorance, some perhaps through something worse. Arthur wanted them to know the consequences. Someone had decided they could not afford to. Oliver eventually stood. "I think we need to open the folder." Lucy looked at him. Yesterday he had refused. Helen noticed too. "You've changed your mind." "Yes." "Why?" "Because the police still aren't here, evidence is being moved around this house, and someone may be actively manipulating what we discover." His expression hardened. "I'm no longer convinced leaving Arthur's work untouched is preserving it." Nobody argued. Oliver crossed toward the table. The leather folder rested where Arthur had left it, the worn brown cover bearing no title. He placed one hand upon it, then stopped. Lucy noticed immediately. "What?" Oliver leaned closer. The brass clasp had been closed the previous evening. She remembered that clearly. Now it hung open. Oliver slowly lifted the cover. Inside, documents remained arranged beneath colored ribbons. Photographs, letters, maps, reports. But one section was empty. A paper divider remained in place. Its handwritten title was visible. Calder Hotel, Photographic Evidence. Lucy felt the room go cold around her. Arthur had found the photograph. Someone had taken it. For several seconds, nobody moved. The empty divider inside Arthur's folder seemed more incriminating than any photograph could have been. Its handwritten title sat neatly above a pocket that had been opened, searched, and emptied with enough care that the rest of the collection remained almost perfectly undisturbed. Calder. Hotel. Photographic Evidence. Oliver looked around the drawing room. Who touched this folder after Arthur died? Nobody answered. His eyes moved from one face to the next. "I'm asking a very simple question." Marcus folded his arms. "And presumably you already know the answer." "I know where I left it. I don't know who opened it." Helen frowned. "You left it here overnight?" "Yes." "Unlocked?" Oliver looked towards her. "I had no reason to believe anyone would interfere with it." Marcus gave a short, humorless laugh. "You've spent the last day telling us one of us might be a murderer." Oliver absorbed the criticism without reacting. "You're right." That admission quietened Marcus more effectively than an argument would have. "I should have secured it," Oliver continued. "I didn't. That was a mistake." Lucy watched him closely. He did not excuse himself or attempt to diminish the error. He simply recorded it mentally and moved on. "When did you last check the folder?" she asked. "Yesterday evening." "Before or after everyone went upstairs?" "Before." "So whoever removed the photograph had all night?" "Possibly." "Or this morning?" "Yes." Andrew looked towards the door. The person outside Arthur's study. Lucy nodded slowly. That could be what they were checking. Oliver turned towards her. "The folder wasn't in the study." "No, but maybe they didn't know that." The thought developed as she spoke. If Arthur kept the evidence in his study before the presentation, whoever wanted the photograph might have expected it still to be there. Helen's expression sharpened, and when they discovered the door locked, they searched elsewhere. Marcus looked towards the open folder. "Which means whoever took it knew what they were looking for." No one challenged that. The missing photograph was too specific. This was not someone rifling through Arthur's papers out of general curiosity. Someone had opened the correct section and removed exactly one item. Henry looked towards Oliver. "Could Arthur have taken it out himself?" "Possible. Then we may be assuming theft where there wasn't any." Lucy considered it. "Would he leave the divider behind?" Henry glanced at the empty pocket. "Perhaps." "But the clasp was open," Oliver said. He looked towards Lucy. "You remember it being closed?" "Yes." "So do I." Andrew shifted uneasily in his chair. "Could Neil have moved something when he brought the folder upstairs?" Every eye turned towards the chef. Neil had been standing near the drawing room doorway throughout the conversation, silent and exhausted. He looked almost offended by the suggestion, though not angry. "No. Oliver spoke gently. Think carefully. I am. When Arthur asked you to bring the folder to the study, did you open it? No. Did you see him open it? Neil hesitated. Yes. What did he do? He checked several sections. Which ones? I don't know. Did he remove anything? Neil's brow tightened as he searched his memory. A photograph. The entire room seemed to contract. Lucy leaned forward. What photograph? I didn't see it properly. Was it from the Calder Hotel section? I don't know. What did Arthur do with it? Neil closed his eyes briefly. He put it inside his jacket. Oliver looked sharply towards him. You didn't mention this before. I didn't know it mattered. When was this? A little after 3. Less than an hour before Arthur was found dead. Lucy felt the shape of the puzzle shift again. If Arthur had removed the photograph himself, then the empty folder might not prove anyone had interfered with his evidence after all. But it created a different problem. Was the photograph on him when Henry examined the body? She asked. Henry looked towards Oliver. I didn't search his pockets. Neither did I, Oliver replied. I deliberately avoided disturbing the body. Marcus shook his head. So the photograph could still be upstairs. Oliver stood. Or someone removed it after Arthur died. The distinction mattered enormously. If the photograph remained inside Arthur's jacket, the apparent theft disappeared. If it did not, then someone had been inside the study. Lucy thought immediately of the figure she had seen outside the locked door that morning. We need to check. Oliver hesitated, only briefly. Then he nodded. I'll do it. Henry comes with me. Marcus rose. And the rest of us? Stay here. Marcus almost smiled. You know that sounds ridiculous now. It sounds necessary. Oliver's tone ended the discussion. He took the study key from his pocket and left with Henry. Nobody in the drawing room spoke until their footsteps faded beyond the staircase. Then Marcus looked towards Helen. You buried Amelia's evidence? Helen did not flinch. I excluded testimony under legal authority. That's a very elegant way of saying the same thing. It is an accurate way. An innocent woman was frightened. Someone grabbed her. She believed she was being followed, and you stopped her speaking. Helen's expression hardened. You think I'm unaware of that? I think you've spent 10 years finding language that makes it easier to live with. The comment landed heavily. Andrew looked towards Marcus. That's enough. No, it isn't. Marcus stood fully now, anger overtaking the polish he usually carried so carefully. We're all pretending this is some intellectual puzzle. Arthur is dead. Amelia died after trying to expose something connected to my family's hotel. A judge buried her testimony. A doctor knew she was frightened. A police officer apparently told everyone to keep quiet, and one of Arthur's photographs has disappeared. Helen rose slowly. Her voice remained calm. That does not give you permission to simplify everyone else's failures, because you're frightened of examining your own. Marcus stared at her. My own? Your family paid Edward Bell to disappear. My father did. And you helped manage the company. I was 28. You were an adult. The room went silent. Marcus's jaw tightened. Lucy expected him to lash out. Instead, something in him seemed to deflate. Yes, the word came quietly. I was. He looked toward the floor. I signed the payment. Nobody had known that. Lucy saw it immediately in Andrew's face, in Evelyn's, in Neil's. Marcus continued before anyone could question him. My father told me it was severance, a clean exit. I knew there had been complaints, but I didn't know the extent of them. Helen watched him carefully. You signed anyway. Yes. Why? Marcus gave a bitter smile. Because I wanted him to think I could run the business one day. There it was. Not innocence, not guilt. Something far more human and therefore more difficult to judge. I told myself I was following instructions, Marcus said. Then Amelia called the hotel months later, asking about Bell, and for the first time I wondered what exactly we had paid him to leave behind. Lucy asked the obvious question. Did you tell Arthur? No. Why? Because I thought he already knew. And if he didn't? Marcus looked towards the empty chair beside the fireplace. Then I suppose I failed his daughter twice. No one spoke after that. The anger had gone from the room, leaving something heavier in its place. Shame. Lucy realized Arthur had gathered people who were not necessarily criminals, but people whose choices had accumulated around Amelia like layers of sediment. One decision had allowed another. Silence had protected convenience. Authority had discouraged questions. Fear had encouraged delay. Perhaps the truth Arthur intended to reveal was not one terrible act. Perhaps it was the chain created by many smaller ones. The study door opened upstairs. Everyone looked towards the entrance hall. Oliver and Henry descended together. Lucy knew from Oliver's expression before he reached the drawing room. The photograph was gone. Nothing? She asked. Oliver shook his head. We checked Arthur's jacket carefully. And the desk? Without disturbing more than necessary. No photograph. Marcus stared towards the ceiling. So someone took it. Not necessarily. Helen looked towards Oliver. What else? Arthur may have moved it somewhere else before he died. Oliver's expression suggested he did not find that explanation convincing. Henry remained near the doorway. There is something else. Lucy looked towards him. What? Arthur's right hand. Oliver glanced at Henry, then nodded for him to continue. When I confirmed the death, his hand was resting on the folder. We remember. Yes. Henry folded his arms. But I noticed something today that I didn't register yesterday. What? Discoloration on 2 fingertips. Marcus frowned. Meaning? I don't know yet. Henry's frustration showed. A faint brown residue. It could be ink, it could be dirt, it could be nothing. Lucy thought of Arthur's fountain pen. Was it on the hand he wrote with? Yes. Andrew looked hopeful. Then ink. Perhaps. Henry shook his head. But it wasn't there when we ate breakfast. Lucy stared at him. You noticed his fingers at breakfast? He passed me the sugar bowl. The precision of the memory seemed absurd, yet perfectly Henry. What makes you certain? He had a small cut beside his thumbnail. I noticed it because it was healing cleanly. Oliver opened his notebook again. So sometime between breakfast and his death, Arthur touched something that left residue on his hand. Henry nodded. Apparently. Lucy thought of the cedar tree. Wet bark. The brass plaque on the bench. Old paper. Pressed flowers. A photograph. Everything now seemed capable of mattering. Andrew suddenly stood. Wait. Everyone looked towards him. The notebook. Oliver frowned. Amelia's? Yes. Andrew moved towards the door. The one in the music room. Oliver held up a hand. What about it? We assumed someone took it out because they wanted us to read it. Lucy understood first. But what if they weren't putting it there? Andrew nodded. What if they were searching it? Helen rose. For the photograph. The realization passed quickly through the group. Arthur had recovered at least one of Amelia's missing journals. Perhaps Amelia herself had hidden photographic evidence inside one. Someone had entered the West Wing looking for it. Perhaps they found only the notebook. Perhaps not. Oliver looked towards Neil. Does Amelia's journal have pockets? Loose covers? Somewhere something could be concealed? Neil thought. She used to tuck everything into books. Flowers, letters, receipts. Lucy felt her pulse quicken. Oliver picked up the music room key. We're going back upstairs. This time he did not tell everyone to remain behind. Perhaps he had finally accepted that keeping 9 frightened people separated throughout Ravensmere House created more risk than bringing them together. They moved as a group through the entrance hall and up the main staircase. Lucy fell beside Evelyn. The illustrator had been unusually quiet throughout the morning. You all right? Evelyn nodded too quickly. Lucy noticed. You don't have to be. I know. They continued upstairs. Then Evelyn spoke softly enough that only Lucy could hear. I've seen that book before. Lucy slowed. Amelia's notebook? Evelyn nodded. Where? At the art exhibition. Lucy stopped completely. The others continued several paces before anyone noticed. When you met Amelia? Yes. Evelyn looked frightened now. She was carrying it. Lucy remembered Evelyn's earlier admission. Amelia had once asked her to sketch a stranger from memory. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't realize until Oliver showed the cover. And now? Evelyn swallowed. I remember something else. Oliver had turned back towards them. What? Evelyn looked at him, then towards the locked music room door at the end of the west corridor. When Amelia asked me to draw the man she thought was following her, she tore a page out of that notebook first. Lucy felt the air leave her lungs. What was on the page? I don't know. She didn't show you? No. Evelyn shook her head. She folded it around something before putting it into an envelope. Oliver's voice became very quiet. What something? Evelyn looked towards Elliot. A photograph. Nobody moved. Elliot stared back at her. Then, with visible discomfort, he slowly lifted the camera hanging against his chest. Lucy understood why before he said it. Elliot's old photograph. The image Arthur believed would prove someone's version of events false. The photograph Amelia had carried 10 years earlier. For the first time, those two threads no longer felt separate. And somewhere inside Ravensmere House, someone had already begun destroying the evidence that might connect them.